Picture this. Sarah gets her first real job at 25, making $60,000 a year. She's excited, maybe a little overwhelmed, but she tells herself she'll start investing once she figures everything out. Maybe in a few years when her salary goes up. Maybe when she pays off her student loans. Maybe when she feels more financially stable. She just needs to wait for the right moment. Down the hall, her colleague Mike starts with the exact same salary on the exact same day. But Mike does something different. He immediately puts $300 a month into a simple index fund, even though it feels scary and he's not sure he's doing it right. Sarah thinks he's being reckless. Mike thinks he's just getting started. Fast forward 10 years. Sarah finally feels ready to invest. She's making more money now. She's paid down some debt, and she's read a few books about personal finance. She's 35 and ready to get serious about her future. Mike has been quietly investing that same $300 every month for a decade. Here's where the math becomes uncomfortable. My name is Jimmy, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, investing, and the psychology behind how people use it. If you're someone who wants to understand money a little better, consider subscribing and giving this video a thumbs up. Now, before we dive into what happened to Sarah and Mike, I want you to think about your own story for a moment. How many times have you told yourself you'll start investing next year? How many times have you said you need to learn more, save more, or earn more before you can begin? How many times have you convinced yourself that waiting is the responsible thing to do? Because here's what most people don't realize. Every day you wait to invest isn't neutral. It's not like pressing pause on a movie. Every day you delay is an active choice that compounds against you, and the cost of that choice grows exponentially with time. But this creates a bigger problem than just missing out on returns. Let's go back to Sarah and Mike. After 10 years, Mike has put $36,000 into his index fund. Assuming a 7% annual return, which is roughly the historical average of the stock market, his account is now worth about $51,000. Not life-changing money, but a solid start. Sarah looks at this and thinks, okay, I can catch up. I'm making more money now. I'll just invest more aggressively. She decides to put $600 a month into the same index fund, double what Mike has been doing. She figures she'll make up for lost time. But something strange starts to happen when you run the numbers forward. Let's say they both continue for another 20 years until they're 55. Mike keeps putting in his original $300 a month, never increasing it. Sarah puts in her $600 a month, consistently investing twice as much as Mike from age 35 onward. At 55, Mike has invested a total of $108,000 over 30 years. His account is worth approximately $739,000. Sarah has invested $156,000 over 20 years. Her account is worth approximately $409,000. Even though Sarah invested $48,000 more of her own money, she ends up with $330,000 less. That's the mathematical penalty for waiting 10 years. And this is where most people make a huge mistake. They look at these numbers and think the lesson is about compound interest and time in the market, which is true. But that's not the real story here. The real story is about what happens in Sarah's head during those 10 years of waiting. Here's the thing. Sarah didn't spend those 10 years doing nothing. She spent them building a relationship with money based on delay, perfectionism, and fear. Every month that went by, she reinforced the neural pathway that says, I'm not ready yet. Every year that passed, she practiced the habit of having a reason why now wasn't the right time. By the time she finally started investing, she wasn't just behind financially. She was behind psychologically. Now you might be thinking, well, at least she eventually started. And you're right, that's better than never starting at all. But here's where it gets interesting. The psychological patterns that caused her to delay in the first place don't just disappear once she opens a brokerage account. People who wait to invest tend to make emotional decisions when they finally do start. They're more likely to panic during market downturns because they feel like they can't afford to lose money after starting so late. They're more likely to chase hot stocks or try to time the market because they feel pressure to make up for lost time. They're more likely to stop investing during tough periods because they never built the habit when it was easier. Meanwhile, Mike spent those 10 years building a completely different relationship with money. Every month, he practiced the habit of investing regardless of how he felt about the market. Every year, he got more comfortable with volatility. By the time he'd been investing for a decade, putting money into the market felt as natural as paying his rent. But the real issue isn't what you think. The real issue is that waiting isn't actually about not having enough knowledge or not having enough money. It's about something much deeper. It's about our fundamental relationship with uncertainty and control. Think about why people say they need to wait. They want to learn more about investing first. They want to pay off debt first. They want to save up an emergency fund first. They want to increase their income first. They want to wait until the market looks less scary. All of these sound reasonable, but they're all variations of the same psychological pattern. They're attempts to create certainty in an inherently uncertain process. Here's what most people don't realize. The feeling of being ready to invest never actually comes. There's always another piece of information to learn, another debt to pay off, another financial goal to achieve first. The goalposts keep moving because the real obstacle isn't external, it's internal. And almost nobody talks about this part. The people who start investing early aren't necessarily smarter or more financially sophisticated. They're just more comfortable with imperfect action. They're willing to start before they feel completely ready because they understand that readiness is a moving target. Let me tell you about another character. David is 30 years old and makes $40,000 a year. He has student loans, credit card debt, and barely any savings. By every conventional financial wisdom standard, he should focus on debt and emergency funds before investing. But David decides to invest $50 a month anyway, just $50, while he's also paying down debt. His friends think he's crazy. Some financial advisors would disagree with this approach. But David understands something that most people miss. He's not just investing money. He's investing in his own psychology. Every month, David practices making a long-term decision in the middle of short-term financial stress. Every month, he strengthens the mental muscle that says his future matters. Every month, he gets a little more comfortable with the idea that he can handle uncertainty. 5 years later, David has paid off his debt, built an emergency fund, and increased his income. But more importantly, he's already been investing for 5 years. When his financial situation improves, he doesn't need to overcome the psychological hurdle of starting. He just needs to increase the amount. Now look, I'm not saying you should invest money you need for basic expenses, or that you should ignore high-interest debt. But I am saying that the all-or-nothing mentality that most people have about investing is psychologically destructive. This is where it gets interesting. The amount you invest in your first year matters far less than the fact that you invest at all. If you can afford to invest $200 a month, but you're waiting until you can afford $400, you're making a massive psychological error. The difference between starting with $200 and starting with $400 is small. The difference between starting now and starting in 3 years is enormous. But something strange starts to happen when you shift your perspective this way. Once you start investing, even small amounts, your brain begins to see you as an investor. You start paying attention to business news differently. You start thinking about long-term financial goals differently. You start making other financial decisions through the lens of someone who's building wealth rather than someone who's always preparing to build wealth. The money grows, but more importantly, you grow into the kind of person who builds wealth consistently over time. Here's the uncomfortable truth that most people avoid thinking about. Time is the only financial resource you can't earn more of. You can increase your income, reduce your expenses, learn new skills, and optimize your investments. But you cannot buy back the years you didn't invest. Every year you wait thinking you'll start next year is a year of compound growth you'll never get back. And the cost of those lost years isn't just financial, it's psychological. It's the habit patterns you don't build. It's the comfort with uncertainty you don't develop. It's the identity as an investor you don't cultivate. Let me give you one more story. Jennifer is 45 years old and just started investing seriously for the first time. She feels behind, which she is, but she also feels frustrated because she knows she should have started earlier. She keeps thinking about where she would be if she had started at 25 or 35. This mental pattern is incredibly destructive. Jennifer spends so much mental energy on regret about the past that she struggles to make good decisions in the present. She takes on too much risk trying to catch up. She gets discouraged when her portfolio drops because she feels like she can't afford any setbacks. But here's what changed everything for Jennifer. She realized that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today. She shifted her focus from the time she lost to the time she still has. Jennifer has roughly 20 years until retirement. If she invests consistently for 20 years, she can still build substantial wealth. It won't be as much as if she had started earlier, but it will be dramatically more than if she spends the next 5 years feeling bad about not starting sooner. Here's the thing about regret. It's not actually about the past. It's about avoiding responsibility for the future. When you spend energy wishing you had started earlier, you're unconsciously avoiding the work of starting now. Now you might be thinking, this all sounds great in theory, but how do you actually overcome the psychological barriers to starting? How do you move from knowing you should invest to actually doing it? The answer is simpler than most people expect, but it requires giving up the fantasy of perfect timing. Start with an amount so small it feels almost ridiculous. $25 a month, $50 a month, whatever amount you can invest without impacting your day-to-day life. The goal isn't to optimize your returns in year one. The goal is to become the kind of person who invests every month regardless of what's happening in the world. Set up automatic transfers so you don't have to make the decision repeatedly. Choose a simple, low-cost index fund so you don't get paralyzed by choice. Start before you feel ready, because ready is a feeling that may never come. Then, as your income grows or your financial situation improves, increase the amount gradually. But never let perfect become the enemy of good enough to start. Here's what I want you to remember. The biggest money error isn't choosing the wrong investments or timing the market poorly or failing to diversify properly. The biggest money error is waiting for someday. Someday when you know more. Someday when you earn more. Someday when you feel more confident. Someday when the world feels more stable. But someday isn't a day of the week. Someday is where dreams go to die. The people who build wealth aren't necessarily the smartest or the highest earners. They're the ones who start before they feel ready and stay consistent longer than feels comfortable. They're the ones who understand that imperfect action beats perfect inaction every single time. Your future self is counting on the decisions you make today. Not tomorrow, not next month, not next year. Today. The question isn't whether you can afford to start investing. The question is whether you can afford to keep waiting.